everybody, I'm Jay from WD Partners. We're going to talk about flagships today. Flagship thinking is something that we do a lot at WD Partners, but we really also think about scalability of those flagships, right? Everything can't be the same level, everything can't be the same investment. So thinking about scaling it from prototype to fleet, that's kind of where we're going to spend our time today. We're going to do a little bit of advertising on WD Partners' behalf. What we're about is we create extraordinary experiences everywhere. So whatever the brand, whatever the retailer, we're thinking about how to connect the brand to the shopper, no matter where they are, at all touch points, and really thinking about making those experiences be memorable at all times. How we do that is through making the solutions be brand right, understanding what the brand's about, what the promises are, the creative expertise around the brand, how ops can allow us to make them functional. I have a lot of creative teams who come up with beautiful ideas, and our ops teams will say, that's cool, but it won't work, so let's do this. So that collaboration back and forth really helps. And then we have build teams on the architecture side for 50 plus years that have been building stores. So these three together really make us understand how to put creative ideas into the marketplace. We're also really thoughtful about putting out our points of view. We're always out in the market and at events like this, seeing what's happening and seeing how consumers are behaving. Thought leadership is a huge part of what we do every day. My partner, Lee Peterson here, is the king of that, and I learn from him all the time. Always wanted to put forth our perspectives in retail, also in restaurants. So you see my partner, Joanne, up there. She'll be at RestaurantSpaces next month. Some of the brands we work with, I think you recognize all of these. I won't go into detail. What's really important about this is that we are agnostic of category. We're really about solving design problems for all of these brands and creating long-term relationships with them. So that's very important to us as well. So today, talking about flagships, I wanted to show a couple of examples. These are 4 images of flagship stores that I've had the pleasure of working with over my career. Everything from Krispy Kreme up in the top corner, a massive flagship experience in Times Square. That's like the amplification of the donut and the theater of the donut, to a toy store in South Korea, to a fashion flagship in Palm Beach, and then a sporting goods flagship. So all of those things, the continuation, the reasons why they matter is that they are the best example of the brand come to life in a physical place. How can we take that kind of thinking and apply it? So to do that, we're gonna step away from retail just for a second. I wanna think about how flagships really are about ideas, and thinking about discovery and information and possibility. If we think, what's a good example of this from top to bottom, maybe the best example of a flagship could be the New York Public Library. So if you think about how the New York Public Library is this beautiful kind of destination, a landmark for knowledge, this beautiful architecture, this almost overwhelming, beautiful space. You can find all the information you need. It is a place to go to learn, to discover, and to be thoughtful. So that's the purpose of that library. Take a step down. This is the Thompson Library at Ohio State University in Columbus. Different from the New York Public Library, but still serving the same purpose. Not quite the masterpiece of architecture, not quite the landmark of the New York Public Library, but still, it's serving a similar purpose. One step further down, your public library. Still serving the ideas, still solving the problem of like learning and discovery, but at a smaller scale. Thinking about how you get people in to learn and find and be kind of inspired by information. One step further down, maybe it's a bookmobile, a pop-up experience. You still have that delivery of knowledge, but it's in a smaller contained space that might travel to where people are. And then last but not least, maybe you have these in your neighborhoods, these tiny little libraries that are shareable. So people come and share a book and take a book. You can actually put one in there and share it with your neighbors. It's a great community involvement. But if you think about this tiny library back to the New York Public Library, that's still flagship thinking about delivery of ideas, right? Just in smaller spaces, different delivery mechanisms, but we're still thinking about those same thoughts and strategies. So from there, where do we go next? Go back to retail. So one of the things that we've noticed recently, if you've paid attention a little bit to what Barnes & Noble is doing at retail. This was a quote from their chief executive who went on the record of saying they don't have an agency doing any interior design or architecture in their stores. They don't have identity across their entire kind of fleet right now. He's actually embracing the snowflake. This quote actually gives me a little bit of pause because it's my business that we do these things. But what I appreciate from him saying this is that he's trying to break the rules and get Barnes & Noble back to where they used to be, which is really about books. So I just want to read this out loud. If you want to buy a book, the guys in Seattle will sell you a book. We know who the guys in Seattle are. The enjoyment and the social experience of that engagement with the books in the bookstore, that's our game. That's really about a mission, right? So he's imagining how his stores can give you that experience, that social engagement with books. And he's doing things like getting rid of the tchotchke stuff at the front of the store, pushing books back to the front and center, making those be the hero. That's really thoughtful flagship thinking. So we all know that all the brands, everybody here in this room, either partners or the retailers yourselves, you have challenges. We're trying to get, thinking across different footprints, different regions, different geographies, different size spaces. Every store is different. How do we kind of tackle this together? We think about this from every aspect. So starting with a store, I'm using Uniqlo here as an example. We all have a familiarity with Uniqlo. They all come together and they make sense together as stores. The fixtures all feel very similar. The experiences feel similar. No matter if you're in a flagship, this is on the right-hand side here. This is their flagship store in Ginza in Tokyo. I had the pleasure of being in that store, and it is like 8 floors of everything you could possibly imagine, but it's still Uniqlo, and it still connects back to what happens in that mall store that you might go to, or the fixture you saw. They're always consistent across. Their product is their product. They're not trying to do something different with the product. It's really about the presentation and the experience. So thinking about the different touch points of how the brand comes to life is where we start from. So that gets us to questions. We want to think about the what, the why, and the who. So when we think about on our side of the business, putting strategy and creative together to answer some very simple questions might get us to some scalability possibilities. So what is the what, right? Getting to what the brand experience is and understanding the essence of the brand. I think too often, many retailers get lost about what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to communicate and how they're trying to talk to their shopper. And getting to that essence is really important so you can actually get to a tiering strategy that makes sense. Scaled activations really are based on the differences. So identifying what those differences are across, knowing how the market is different in different places, that location considerations are different. Austin is not the same as New York, is not the same as Tokyo. So understanding what those needs are, you might have different shopper needs. The customers are different, your bases are different. Identifying those things at the outset is really, really important so that when you get to tiering your flagship thinking, you have that knowledge already established. And then the who. This is not about customers. This is about you guys. So we have worked with many different brands. It's really about connecting the silos and breaking them down. So you all know in your worlds, there are different organization structures, there are C-suite leaders, there are marketing teams, there's store design, there's digital, there's all those different players, all with different points of view and perspectives. We need to connect those and kind of get them on the same page earlier than later. We're working on a project right now that we'll have 3 stores opening in the summertime that had a retailer who had a very strong perspective, a merchandise provider with a very strong perspective, and a operator with a very strong perspective. They all didn't see things the same way. We had to connect them to make sure we were all shooting for the same goals so that they had expectations set when we started, and doing that at the outset is really important. You have to make sure that those conversations are happening sooner than later, because if you get behind the 8 ball and everybody's expectations are messed up at the end, then nobody's gonna be happy. So connecting those dots sooner is really important. And then the how. So we talk a lot about choreographing, customer journeys and plotting the strategies, understanding what the different possibilities are, but it really gets back to what is the goal of the store itself, right? It's not just selling merchandise, it's expanding the brand, it's getting people kind of in the world that you're trying to make them think about and make them feel like they have possibility to explore. Everybody likes a checklist. We'll go through some 6 to-dos, things to actually consider as you work with your teams, either internally or with consultants, to get some action items. Like, how do you think about this stuff as you start thinking about tiering your store experiences? So first and foremost, develop that tiering structure. This is an example of just a, frankly, really ugly spreadsheet. But it's an easy tool where you kind of identify what are the things that matter. These are about experience. These are about brand. This is about the expression. Just outline these things. Play them through. Have the teams work through them. And then make that be flexible so you get to a kit of parts. Strategize the experiences and the services. So stores today are really about more than just the selling. It has to be about the reasons to go to the store. So adding service into your equation is a huge part of the success of how you can tier. When services become a reason to go, shoppers have more reason to engage. Looking at those services as a monetary possibility. We heard our friend from the Museum of Ice Cream yesterday talk about that's a monetized experience that you go to a place to do something. How can that be part of your financial strategy as well? Consistent brand experience. If it's one thing or if it's 6 things, how do you create that flexible, movable kit of parts that allows the store to be kind of organic and feel like it's alive? So it's not just set in stone. You can move it, you can change it, you can test it. That's part of the goal. And then obviously we want to grow acquisition, build brand equity, all of those things in the market. So loyalty becomes part of the traffic driver. And finally, conversion, right? And it's not just transaction, that's important, but it is about interaction. What's happening in the store that is different from what's happening on their sofa, right? We've talked a lot about how people can do most of their shopping from their couch. We have to make the store have a reason to be interactive and not just transactional. So those are 6 things. Here's another one. Experience principles are really a way in which our team, and many others too, I'm sure, but we build these as the ingredients for the recipe. Building experience principles for your concept early and making sure that everybody's aligned to this really allows them, all the teams, to have something to kind of test their work against. This is just a simple example. You might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 principles, I don't know. But working through these that you know what you're trying to achieve, you know what you're going after, and everybody's on the same page. Again, it's back to that alignment across the silos so that as you figure out what the store experience is, you can check the box and say, yes, we did this, we did this, we did this. Every decision needs to be made based on these experience principles. Whatever the scale, whatever the investment, these should remain consistent. An example of that, I'll give a piece of work that we actually just completed. This is Rebel is a retailer in Australia. The biggest sporting goods retailer in Australia. We had the chance to work with them via Nike to create a couple of flagship experiences in this new store in Melbourne, specifically for the female athlete. The female athlete, and this is part of our experience principles, was being underserved in the market. We have a joke in our studio when you go into a sporting goods store often in a women's department, it's in the corner and they painted something pink and put a plant on its shelf. That's not what the female athlete's looking for. She wants to be included. She wants to be seen in these spaces. So our job in the store design was to put her front and center and to give people that access to like, hey, I want to be her. I want to be that female athlete. Create experiences that are kind of forward-looking and then allow her to shop the things that she cares about. Putting bras and leggings front and center in the store. It's really unheard of in these larger sporting goods environments. We wanted to make that be central part of the experience. This is all flagship, right? This is all very kind of high touch, high end. Our job then too was to scale that thinking, take those same principles, those same elements, and reduce and flex. Make them feel like they are part of the same vocabulary, but in a smaller, less expensive way. So taking those same principles, putting them in different footprints. This is now being scaled, I want to say, across 5 to 10 stores this year, and it's going to be part of their entire fleet. So again, thinking about the principles from the outset and then bringing them down into the scaled versions. So I'll go back through another list. Come up with that core concept. Make sure that the core concept is answering all the things that we all talked about. Define your tiers. know what the tiers mean, figure out what makes the most sense and what is most important to your brand, figure out the best expression. So this might be the flagship. This might be the New York Public Library. And then core plus and balance of fleet, right? So thinking about the core with maybe some add-on experiences, and then how do you apply it to the entire fleet of stores? Feels pretty simple and pretty straightforward, but just again, identifying these things as you start and go through the concept creation allows the tiering and the flexibility of having that kind of modular kit of parts to really work. We also think about the idea of purpose-driven as a driver, right? Purpose-driven drivers. Formats and experiences should be driven by what your customers care or need about. Their need states should drive what it is you're actually delivering in the store. We've had the chance to work with a brand that you'll recognize here in a second for many years. And this brand, which I think you could all identify here, is very clear about their prototype. This is Starbucks. So when you come into a Starbucks, this is the most typical kind of version of like, you know where the fast kind of grab and go food is, you know where to place your order, you know where to get your order. There's some comfortable seating. I wouldn't call it a flagship. It's just their kind of standard everyday store. They identify, though, Starbucks, these different levels. So then taking it down to the standard store, maybe a little bit less of the prototype, but it's still delivering the same experience effectively. Cafe might be amping it up a little. This might be that place where you go and hang out, where you actually go for a quick business meeting, where you might go on a date, where you might just want to hang because it's a little bit more elevated. The materiality of the space, the way digital is employed, the lighting might feel different. It just has different touch points, but it's still part of the same Starbucks look and feel. This level, the pop-in sort of their newer one where you go in and there's no seating, but you still can get all the same services. You can still get all the same grab and go. The experience of ordering still makes the most sense, but you're not actually hanging out, right? But what's important here is that Starbucks has identified pop-in is a need state that people have, specifically in urban environments. And then pickup. So you may have seen these stores. These are tight little stores that do not have any retail. You have already ordered on your mobile app. You have already made your selections, and you go there to fulfill that. These stores, though, while they're tiny, feel very luxurious. Like they've upped the level of materiality. They've upped the level of how the brand feels. And again, they've identified what those tiers need to do. And last but not least, Reserve. If you've had the chance to be in the Reserve stores anywhere in the world, they are the best expression of the Starbucks brand. This kind of amplification of all of the possibilities of what they provide. Used visual merchandising, really luxurious materiality, storytelling, experiences, services, all the things we talked about before kind of brought into this one beautiful space. This happens to be the Empire State Building in New York. They do this very purposefully across different footprints in their Reserve stores, always while feeling like a Starbucks. So point being, you know, Starbucks is Starbucks, we all know that, but they're doing a really smart, thoughtful job of identifying the tiers and making these tiers all have the reasons why. So you know what the material palettes are for each of those tiers. You know where you have choices to move, how artwork might be used differently, how lighting might be used differently, how seating might be used differently. It's a good example of just like delivering the tiers up and down, and you know where to kind of slot in the things you're trying to solve for. So, big brands doing big things, very exciting, right? I'm gonna end with a local brand, a small brand that is not trying to solve for global expansion. But it's a good example of identifying what it's about before you get into the mess. These are my parents. My parents retired 6-7 years ago, and they got a little bored and decided they wanted to open an ice cream shop. It always been my dad's dream to have a little ice cream shop. They were born and raised their family in this small town in Ohio called Chillicothe. They wanted a space to like have community and bring people together about something that people love. We all learned yesterday that everybody loves ice cream, except 5 people, I think, in the room. So bringing that level of like something you love to a place was my parents' goal. And they just had this like desire to give back to their community because the downtown had been really sad for a long time, and it was being revived, and they came back and said, hey, we want to be a part of this. So I helped design their flagship store. And in this store, my job as their consultant, they were the hardest client I've ever had, I'll give you that. My job was to give them the tools to figure out how to keep this thing going, right? How do they make sure that this has viability and kind of feels fresh and feels new? I gave my mom the vocabulary of visual merchandising. She'd never heard the phrase before, but she loved the idea. And I kind of taught her use your windows as you're kind of look into the store. Give seasonality and expression and feel like you can do something new in the store, but it's always your brand. It's always something that you can talk about to your friends and neighbors and drive people to come to the place. She went crazy. She wanted to do new windows every 3 weeks. I'm like, Mom, chill. Just do it once a season. It's all good. Even tactical things how do you do flavors? There's no digital menu boards in this store. It doesn't exist. I gave them this idea, let's just do simple boards where you can put a piece of paper. And if cotton candy runs out one day, just pull that piece of paper off and put another one up. So again, using the tools to kind of take flagship into a more tactical way and think about how the store really does answer what it's about, why it exists, and who is it for. So like the Museum of Ice Cream yesterday, really they solved these questions by delivering joy. That was really their job. These are my parents' 5 grandkids. And these kids now know what joy is because they have their grandparents doing a retail store. And that really delivered the best thing. So that's it. Thank you, appreciate it.
Wow. Wow, Jay,
if you want to download, you can download from that QR code too if you'd like the presentation. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, that was really lovely. Thank you for sharing that at the end there. It's also a great way of showing how it applies at every level. We have time for a question if anyone wants to throw one up. If anyone has anything, yeah, sure.
You're not allowed to ask a question, Lee.
This is going to be your hardest question
Oh,
ever.
shit.
So, the Petco store in New York City, which is a flagship store,
yes.
right? And they have every bell and whistle you could possibly think of in there. But then you go to their store in Indianapolis, and it's a box with a bunch of shelves and stuff like that. So what would you recommend that they do, to kind of bring that flagship element across the board? Because they have one spectacular store and many really normal stores.
It's a good question. I don't have any specific insight into what Petco's doing, but I have been in that store in New York in Union Square. If you're in New York, definitely check it out. It's beautiful. I hope they're using it as a testing ground. I hope that they're looking at that flagship as a place to test and learn so they can see what experiences are working and then they could actually deliver that across their fleet. I mean, you can't do all of the things that are in that flagship store, but the way they do kind of the doggy barber shop or the services or the kind of treat bar, it's really interesting and clever stuff that could be scaled. I'm imagining they're testing it. It has to be a testing ground.
Jay, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.